Welcome to Masters of Mediation, a novel approach to dispute resolution. These interviews are promoted by Nova School of Law, and their purpose is to explore the world of mediation through our active listening and inspiring conversations with world-renowned mediators. Today we have the privilege of diving into the universe of a mediator who was named Academic of the Year in the Australian Law Awards in 2021 and is consistently named in Who's Who of Mediation as a leading Australian mediator. Rosemary Howell is a professional fellow at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, teaching dispute resolution to undergraduates and negotiation to postgraduates. She has experience as a lawyer, strategic planner, teacher, and CEO, and has served the term as Secretary General of the Law Council of Australia. Her doctorate scrutinizes lawyers in negotiation. She delivers dispute resolution, facilitation, and coaching services to a diverse range of national and international clients through her business, strategic action, and strategic resolution. Her mediation practice focuses on opportunities for early intervention and resolution. What an honor. Let's go to the interview.
Hello everyone, I am Joana Campos Carvalho, and together with Gabriel Ribeiro, I will have the honor of conducting this interview. Hello, Gabriel.
Hello everyone, it's an honor to be here today.
And hello, Rosemary. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
It's certainly a privilege to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we would like to start this interview by asking if you could share with us the first time that you discovered mediation, how that happened, how mediation entered your life.
Well, I'm very fortunate because I didn't go looking for mediation. Mediation came looking for me. And I feel very blessed. I went to Harvard to do the program on negotiation, and I didn't want to go at all. I was very busy in my business as a strategic planning consultant, and my husband was mad keen to go, and he pushed me, and I was so cross. And then I went to Harvard and loved it, and then we were invited back to be teaching fellows in the program. And then I was introduced to the wonderful Professor Frank E.A. Sander, who is my absolute hero on the planet. And we were teaching fellows in his program, and then he came to Australia and he stayed with us. And I read the Pound Conference, I read his papers, I fell in love. And, you know, it's like love. It's like the love that finds you rather than the love you go looking for. That's the one that's a keeper, you know?
It's so good.
And I like it.
I love that image that you mentioned of falling in love with mediation. For me, it was a bit like that as well. So I find it so amazing.
Yeah, and it must have been a great honor to meet Professor Frank Sanders. I think he's inspiration for all of us. So, making a follow-up question, Rosemary, what qualities do you think that make an effective mediator?
When I was thinking about this question, the first thing I put down was patience, and more patience. I think that's the first thing. If you have a low threshold of boredom, do not become a mediator. You have to last the course. And I think there's a second piece that's very important, and that is the ability to balance how we're trained to conduct a mediation with the need to act in a situation-specific way. Because always and never doesn't work. And that there's a tension there. Oh, I know I've been trained to do that. It doesn't sit right. It doesn't sit well with me. So I'm not getting the traction. what might be some other pieces of my repertoire that belong here. So I think those are the qualities.
Mm-hmm. So you mean like the ability to reflect on what you're doing and trying to put together what you learned with what you're called to do in the moment, right?
Exactly. Very well said. Yes, exactly.
And the patience is also very interesting. What do you think happens to a mediator that has no patience?
A mediator who has no patience is very outcome focused.
Right.
And pushes parties to an outcome without allowing the conflict to unfold, because there's a famous saying, no dispute is ever about what it seems to be about. And if you are not patient, you only hear people's positions and you never discover their interests. And you don't give the parties the chance to resolve the conflict themselves. Because my view is, in the right environment, most parties can sort it out. They just need a safe place and someone who has seen everything so they're not shocked. Yes. So that's my explanation.
Right. And it's also related to the idea of time, right? If you give someone time, it will be probably enough to make a movement forward in some way, right?
Yeah, that's right, Joanna. And my experience is that conflict that's been a long time coming is a long time resolving.
Sure,
so
it makes sense, right?
Yes, doesn't it?
To untangle everything.
Yes, yes. And sometimes, you know, the power of the reflective space, where the reflective space is the spot between what happens and what you're going to do about it. And it's the richest space on the planet. If you can get parties to sit there, and they don't have to have an answer, they can just reflect, wonderful things happen there. The tangled becomes untangled. It's wonderful.
Yeah, wonderful. The next question relates to techniques. So you mentioned some of the characteristics that mediators can have. Would you like to share with us also one or two techniques that you find the most useful in mediation?
I think there are two that I find the most useful. And the first one is a process technique that many of my colleagues do not use. And that's the pre-mediation process. So lots of my colleagues have a formal logistical pre-mediation process. Where are we going to meet? Who's going to be there? What documents do we need? I think there's a much richer pre-mediation process. And perhaps that's because my mediation space is the space where people have a very important commercial relationship that they either need to resolve the dispute and stay together, or part with grace without damaging each other. And that's quite a specific field. And that means I need to take some time getting to know each of the parties before the mediation begins. I have to decide if I'm the right person. I have to decide if mediation is the right process, a kind of triage. And they have to decide if they trust me. So I have an intake process. I send them away to sleep on what's happened and reflect. And then I ask them to come back if they still want to proceed with me. And they, even if I've been, if their organization has brought me in, they have to choose me. Because if I'm just imposed on them, I'm not their person. I mean, not that I'm anyone's advocate, I'm not. But they have to feel agency and that they chose me.
And
so,
just following up on the pre-mediation technique, do you do that with both parties at the same time, or do you do that separately?
No, I do that separately. And again, I'll adopt a different process according to who the party is. So a very emotional party, I'll be using my tools with dealing with emotion. For a very linear, logical, focused party, I might engage that party in doing some formal conflict mapping, using a conflict mapping tool. So I try to focus on how I read the party. So that's one tool that I find enormously valuable. It's really, really rich. And I've never had any. I have had a few situations where I've said I am not the right person, but I've never had anyone said they didn't want to proceed with me. And I think it's because of I say I'm an investor. I'm investing in you, and I want to see if this is the right place.
You take the time to build a relationship with them, so they acknowledge it, of course.
Yes. And then I think the other technique I would share with you is, and this is a wonderful technique. I didn't develop it, but I love it. And that is to ask open-ended questions that mostly focus on the why question.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me, I've noticed you talking a lot about this. Tell me why that's so important to you. Or you've had a lot of offers made to you during this mediation and you keep saying no. And I'm interested why you are pursuing this with such vigor. Why is this so important to you? So those questions, often people tell you what they want, but then they're not in touch with their interests, so they don't have a good understanding of why they want it. And I think very rich information comes from the why question.
And is it not sometimes uncomfortable for the parties to be asked so directly, why do you want this? Do you never feel like they some way withdraw from the conversation?
I usually find if I say something like, I've been listening very carefully to you, and you're saying some things that are very important. I want to understand them more deeply. And then I'll say, can you? So I'm not challenging them or confronting them. I'm doing it in a way that we're having a joint exploration. I think that's safer. And when you're a mum and a grandma, you get away with a lot.
You find that's important? You've seen some changes as time goes on in the way you interact with people and also the way people interact with you?
Oh, yes, Joanna. Oh, yes. Because, when you're young and pretty, it's quite nice being young and pretty, but the power that you have over people has nothing to do with this. It's got to do with what's below this. And when you get old and become much more fearless, care much less whether people think you're pretty or what or like you, and that fearlessness and the ability to call people out and finding your authentic voice. So for me, I was doing a mediation recently with the CEO and a board, and the chair of the board was very rude. And I said to him, I'm very disappointed that you would choose to speak like that. I really expected more from you. He was in my hand for the rest of the minute.
I can imagine that. You speak of freedom also, right? It's a way of freedom.
It's the grandma syndrome. It makes getting old worth it, I have to say.
And Rosemary, that's really interesting, and that leads us, I think, to our next question that deals with intense emotions. So you just named and gave us some examples, and how do you manage more examples or more techniques managing parties' intense emotions such as sadness, anger, rage?
I think the first thing I would say is every emotion is different. Every emotion has a different face, may come from a different place. And I think you have to fit your management approach to the particular emotion. Let's take sadness, for example. You know, sometimes you just have to sit with someone who's very sad. You have to have a caucus. You just have to sit with them. Say nothing, just be there. I'm here for you. I'm just going to sit with you and keep you safe while you work through this, and then shut up. And so, you know, that's something that works with sadness. Where people are angry, I find it's better just to let them be angry, because mostly people can't sustain it. They run out of oxygen. And then, you know, they come back to earth, and then they quite often get very apologetic. And, you know, they say, oh, I'm sorry I got so angry. And I say, it's okay, my grandchildren have temper tantrums too, don't worry. And then we move on. But rage is a different thing. Rage is dangerous, and it damages the safety of the moment. So you have to put a stop to rage. On occasion, I have terminated a mediation where one of the parties raged and made threats. So again, it goes back to my idea of situation-specific behavior. I'm trying to name the emotion and think about what the emotion is, and then think, what's the tool that works with that emotion?
Perfect. Well, you just remember me of there's an author called Douglas Knoll, and he has a book that's called De-escalate, how to calm an angry person in 90 seconds or less, in which he says exactly the same, that when somebody is actually like very angry or something, to name the emotion, like you say, I can see that you're angry, I can see that you're frustrated. That helps in order as well for the person to understand what's happening and maybe to calm them down. So yeah, that's I totally agree.
And I think the last thing I would say under that piece is formality is your friend. My experience is if I come into a space that feels absolutely full of emotion, I might introduce myself as Dr. Howell. And I mean, normally I might say, call me Rosemary, but formality encourages people to behave well and has that calming effect without me having to do anything else. So in a mediation where there's a big group and there's a lot of bad behavior in the room and it's hard to manage, I will be very formal, and I'll call people by their formal name, and I might say that I need to understand what's happened. Can you please summarize the last comment that you made? What are the three most important? So I'll ask formal questions and procedural things, because that tends to encourage people to behave better. And it exercises a bit of discipline over them.
It's so interesting. I had never thought about formality in that way, but it makes absolute sense. Because when you feel like you are more at ease, it's easier to release your emotions, right? When there's a formality, you'll restrain a bit. That's very interesting.
And when you're short and round like me, you know, you have to do something to sort of make a stand about creating an environment that's bigger than you are.
That's great. So we've talked about some of the things that you'll find useful in mediation. The next question we'd like to ask you is, what do you enjoy most about practicing mediation?
So this was your hardest question.
I'm looking forward to the answer.
Well, if I'm truthful, and I choose to be truthful, I can't say that I enjoy mediating. It's the hardest thing I ever do. I think it's very important work. And, you know, when I know that I've been a catalyst in parties reaching a good outcome, I feel proud. And I really value the coaching element where I have the opportunity to do a bit of a skills transfer. You know, I model behavior and I can see them taking on that behavior, and it gives me confidence that they're going to leave and use it constructively in the next conflict. But, you know, I find mediation extraordinarily hard. And I feel this enormous sense of responsibility, and that exhausts me. And I couldn't do 5 a week. Like some of my colleagues do 5 a week. And I don't think they work in the relationship space the way I do, where you've got these long-standing business relationships and issues of trust and interwoven businesses and terrifying fears of bankruptcy and all sorts of things. I don't know, maybe I'm fooling myself, but it's very, very hard work.
So is it a case where you do something hard and then the reward comes after, when you feel like you've accomplished something, then you can enjoy the moment of the aftermath of the mediation, maybe?
And I don't feel that you ever really learn anything from doing the easy stuff.
Mm-hmm. So true.
I think it's the hard stuff that builds our repertoire and keeps us relevant. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm waiting for the day when my children take my car keys and say, "Okay, Mum, that's it." But I want to prolong that day as long as possible so that I can be relevant and skilled and in the moment and still growing.
Yeah, growing is, I think, a key word there as well, right? You can also gain something from the sense of growth that you mentioned.
Yes, yes.
Thank you for all the insights, Rosemary. And you already named some examples of mediations that you were in that were really interesting. Can you tell us like a story from a mediation that you thought was particularly interesting that you can recall?
I thought about this very hard, and because I'm afraid I am a storyteller and I've got lots of stories. Mm-hmm. But I thought I might tell you about the most useful mediation I've ever been in. Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So this was reasonably early into my mediation career. And a former student of mine from the university had a law practice, and she called me and asked me if I would do a mediation for her. And she worked for a particular community about which I am completely ignorant. And it was a board of directors and the senior leadership of a school in this particular cultural group. And they were locked in mortal combat. And I said, I shouldn't do this. I am not the right person. I'm terrified I might behave in a culturally inappropriate way. I think it would be dreadful to make a mistake. And she said, nobody else will touch it. If you don't do it, there's no hope.
Big pressure there.
No pressure. And it was 2.5 hours away from my house in Sydney. So I said, all right. And I got there, and we spent the morning with them yelling and screaming at each other, yelling and saying terrible things. And your family did this back for 3 generations, and oh, you're a shame to our community. Oh, it was just awful. And at lunchtime, I sent them off to lunch. And I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to run away. What can I do? And I rang my husband, who's wonderful, and I said, I'm a failure. I can't do this. I've got myself in over my head. I'm a dud mediator. And he said, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And they came back after lunch and they were smiling at each other and they were being pleasant and getting along. And we sat down and I said, so where are we up to? Where would you like to go from here? And they said, oh, we're done. I said, what? We're done. They said, we just needed to get that out of our system, We're all pretty cross and we can't actually agree and we've agreed to disagree. Bye.
Wow.
Wow. Wasn't that a great piece of learning?
Yes, of course.
Sometimes a good outcome is extraordinarily different from what you could contemplate. And it's another reason not to be outcome focused.
Mm-hmm.
The parties own the outcome, not me. Wasn't that a great piece of learning? I still remember that feeling so afraid. I'd ruined a community and they were going to kill each other. Oh God.
I was listening to you and I was thinking two different things. One of them is, of course, that power of becoming aware that really the outcome does not belong to us and that we have no idea. But I would also like to mention the importance of having someone that you can call when you're feeling like you're stuck in mediation.
Yes.
Just to talk it through and to reflect on what's happening. You have the fortune of having that in your husband, of course, but that can be maybe a generalized thing as well, the importance of having that person to call as a mediator.
I think in life, I have 3 coaches, and I think in life it's really useful to have trusted advisors. I don't always take their advice, but having a safe place to download. And I normally have a ritual where I have a little visual way of protecting myself from whatever toxicity might be in the room, because you do have to protect yourself from taking on people's stuff. Sometimes I'll let it slip, and it's really helpful to have a coach to help you kind of disinfect yourself so that your mental well-being can be restored. I'm very blessed.
Great. The next question relates to trends. What trends are you seeing emerge in the types of disputes currently going to mediation, or trends in mediation in general? What could you share with us on this subject?
I am very troubled about the rise of hyperpolarization in the world. Extremely worried. And I think it's brought itself into the mediation room. I think a consequence of hyperpolarization is that we've lost the middle ground, not just in mediation, but in life in general and in mediation in particular. So parties find it much harder, much more polarized. They're much less trusting. Even in a faraway place like Australia, which is very far away from trouble and strife mostly, we're very afraid about what's happening in the world. And I think there are a lot of people who no longer feel safe. And so they bring that mistrust and their lack of feeling of safety into the mediation room. And I think I'm naming it as that. That's the thing I see, that, and I don't see an outcome. I don't see a good outcome for it, because I think bad actors in the world are deliberately creating hyperpolarization to damage a whole range of things. So, yes, I'm troubled about that.
But do you feel as a mediator there's something you can do to address that hyperpolarization that you see in the room? Or is it something that is beyond?
Well, I've been doing quite a lot of study of hyperpolarization. There are some very interesting materials, and in our last federal election, there was a group of facilitators who were using a technique called deep democracy, which is a developed tool for dealing with that hyperpolarization. And I've been seeking to build my skill. I couldn't say I'm skilled yet, but I'm seeking to build my skills in those techniques, which they strike me as being honourable and very well thought out.
Great. Good that there's hope.
Yes, I'm worried. I trust the next generation. You know, the 12-year-olds of the world, they are going to save us if anybody is.
Okay. I'll tell my son today that you're counting on him. I'll tell my son today that you're counting on him.
Yes.
No, it's
I
true.
am.
It's true. The next generation will be very important indeed.
Yeah. And our next question is broader. It's concerning advices, and I would ask you, Rosemary, what is the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Well, I'd like to give you the long answer to this, if you'll permit me, and I'm sure your clever editor will edit me out if I'm going on too much.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, yeah.
And, you know, it's interesting, I've never had a mentor. And while I was practicing as a lawyer and when I was a CEO and in my most challenging years, I was very disappointed that I didn't have and couldn't find a mentor. And one day I thought to myself, well, Rosemary, be your own mentor. And so that's what I decided to be. And the best piece of advice I ever gave myself as my mentor was, you are always rewarded for keeping your nerve. And in the work I do, there's rarely a day goes by when I'm not afraid I'll mess it up, afraid I don't have the skills, afraid I'm not clever enough. And, you know, that's what I say to myself. You're always rewarded for keeping your nerve. And by God, it's true. It works. I commend you.
I'll have that in my head as well now. Resilience also, right? It's about resilience.
It's about resilience. It's about resilience. And it's another way of saying, you know, you've got this, even if you don't know it. Even if you don't know how you're going to go into yourself and draw out some amazing piece of wisdom, you've got it. You've got it. You can do it.
So on to our last question, which is, what advice would you give to someone who is now looking to start their career in mediation?
So I would say, and of course I don't know the age of the person that I'm talking to, but let's say it's a younger person, if I may. I would say start somewhere else. Try everything. Have a very rich life. Build skills. Build repertoire. Try everything. You know, the most dangerous person on the planet is the 4-year-old who wants to be a brain surgeon and becomes a brain surgeon. There's no peripheral vision, you know, they're just looking here. And what is possible is not in front of us. What's possible is in, you know, this corner and that corner, and the skill that you learn by doing something that appears to have no relationship at all to mediation. And then along the way, find people who are heroes to you. And I'm astonished at how generous people are. Ask them, what do you think? What should I do now? How can you, if you were me, where would you go next? And they're the people who give you a leg up and give you a nudge and say, yes, I think you're ready. Or, you know, I really think if you spent a bit of time doing some volunteering work in a community, in a not-for-profit, I think you'd be a really good fit there. Try that. You know, there's so much to learn. So I know that's a weird answer.
Oh, it's an amazing one.
But I think that the best mediators I know have had this curvy, non-linear path to where they are now. And like me, they've kind of been taken places rather than being absolutely fixed on the destination.
It's like allowing life to teach you what you need on the way to where you think you want to go. Maybe you won't even get there, but you'll certainly learn a lot when you allow yourself to be on that path, right?
I think that's absolutely true, Joan. I know this might sound a bit corny, but I actually believe in serendipity. You know, there's a kind of serendipitous energy in the world that's available to us if we let it in, and if we stop being so controlling of our path through life. Because aren't the best, some of the best things that happen to us lucky accidents? You turn the wrong way down a street, you go into a shop on impulse and you meet someone you haven't seen for 10 years, or I don't know, all kinds of wonderful things. Going to Harvard against my will and meeting Frank Sander and having those wonderful experiences. So I think serendipity is the greatest force in our lives to celebrate and enjoy.
So true. I believe in that as well. So I think it's amazing that you mention it. And it's also a great way to end this conversation. Thank you so much for all your wisdom, for your time as well, for the many insights that you shared with us today, and also for just the way that you showed up and allowed us to have access to this enormous pool of wisdom and ideas, and to share them with us. Gabriel, I'll give you also the words to end.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was an honor. I learned a lot, and certainly I'll take all these takeaways with me in my career and try to spread the word as well. I think there was a lot of important learnings here. So thank you very much.
My great pleasure. I wish you both continuing joy in your field.
Thank you, Rosemary.